The Thanksgiving turkey has long since been digested, but we've still got some sports takes left in us. And speaking of turds, we'll talk about the Green Bay Packers performance today. All of that and more, all on today's Black and Blue on this December 2nd, 2013. I want to welcome you to the show and apologize for that opening analogy, which was just terrible. But I'm Jesse Gunnigan, your host, and if you want to get in touch with the show, if you want to tell me how terrible that was, it's at BlackBlueRAQ on the Twitter machine. What are we going to talk about after missing last Friday because we were all on Thanksgiving hangover? We've got a full weekend of action to talk about. 2 games as everyone in the division played each other this weekend. We will get to Bears-Vikings in a bit. We will debut a new segment, which we've actually been doing for a few weeks now. I've just decided to finally give it a name. It's called Where We At? Where we'll basically just look at where we at. You know, the standings in the division, what everyone has left. Playoff time is really starting to hit. We've hit December now, so we are starting to really come down to that stretch. Things are going to be decided in the next few weeks in this division and around the National Football League. As we try to do every Monday, we will get to our Players of the Week segment. But first, we have to go all the way back to Thursday. Think back in your minds. Think really hard. Because Thursday was a long time ago and a lot of food ago. But we must talk about it because there's a lot of topics coming out of it. And, of course, what am I referring to? The Detroit Lions, 40. The Green Bay Packers, 10. Woo! I don't know if it sounded like I hit the microphone there, but I hit the microphone. Maybe the worst game I have ever seen the Green Bay Packers play in my 24 years of life. Now, I wasn't around for the 70s and the 80s. I've only really been around for good times, so the selection of truly terrible football games that they've played isn't very big. But this one goes to, considering the situation and just how terribly they played, this one goes right to the top of the list on my list of terrible Green Bay Packers performances. And we have breaking news right here at the start. The Green Bay Packers have signed running back Khalil Bell, which is a name I recognize, and which is a name I will hopefully have more for you later in the show. But that is according to a league source via Rob Demovsky on Twitter, who is a Green Bay Packers beat writer. The Packers have signed running back Khalil Bell. He worked out last season, and he worked out again today. So there's that. I don't know what it means, but we break news when it happens during the show, and that is, I guess, news. Anyway, back to the crap show that was Thursday for the Green Bay Packers. We will start with the most jarring statistic from that game, and it's a game full of jarring statistics. 561 yards allowed by the Green Bay Packers on Thursday to the Detroit Lions. And if the Lions put up 561 on you, normally you figure 500 of that is Stafford going insane. Wasn't on this day. 320 passing, 241 rushing. So they were terrible every way they could have been terrible. The Lions go 9 of 12 on third down on this day as well. What happened? We said it when Rodgers went out against the Bears about a month ago that this defense was going to have to step up. And they didn't step up that night and they didn't get the win. But we thought this defense had been better all year. It had been, pretty darn good for most of the year. Had a bad game against Chicago, but you figured with them having to rally together, knowing the focus was on them, that they'd be able to step up and play well. And they haven't. In fact, they've gotten much worse since Aaron Rodgers went out. And you would hope they bottomed out on Thursday, because I cannot imagine an NFL defense playing worse than that. Unless Detroit did something stupid to kill themselves in their own drives on Thursday, the Green Bay defense just wasn't having it. They had no interest in stopping whatever Detroit wanted to do. Detroit did that a few times. They turned the ball over a few times. But when they didn't, just right down the field. Every time. Running or passing. yardage on yardage on yardage. And this isn't what to do, or this isn't to what to do. This isn't to discredit what Detroit did execution-wise, because Detroit clearly had a game plan, and they exploited the Packers' defense in every way you possibly can. And they were sharp and they were crisp, and they did do some things that were bad, early turnovers that kept the Packers in it early. But no NFL offense does what this team did to the Green Bay Packers defense without the other side, the defense that they're facing, being completely incompetent. And on Thursday, that is how you would best describe the Green Bay Packers defense. Completely and totally incompetent. They didn't know at all how to stop what Detroit wanted to do, and they didn't. Unless Stafford threw one right to them or fumbled the football, this defense was clueless for 60 minutes and got absolutely torched. I believe 561 is more yardage than they gave up to Colin Kaepernick and the 49ers in the playoffs last year. And they seem to save these kinds of defensive lapses for huge games. I mean, the playoffs against the Giants 2 years ago, the playoffs last year against the 49ers. This game against Detroit was huge. And in all three of those, the defense played like absolute garbage. And at this point, someone's got to lose their job for this defense. I don't know if it's Dom Capers or who it is, but somebody has got to lose their job, because this is no longer good. It hasn't been good enough for about 3 years, and they can't keep doing this defensively. This defense at the end of seasons cannot continue playing this poorly and wasting the careers of everyone that's awesome on this offense. And the offense was terrible on Thursday too, and we'll get to that. But when you look at the career of Brett Favre, let's say, and you see all of those records and start streak and all so much awesomeness, but only the one trophy, and you feel like, the Packers were always good when he was around, but they were only great for those few years in the mid to late 90s, and you feel like the Packers wasted a lot of Brett Favre's years, and it's starting to feel like this defense is so bad that they got Aaron Rodgers his one, but now they're so bad that if they don't fix it, they're gonna, for over the next 5 years or so, they're gonna waste the prime of one of the best quarterbacks who's ever played. Which is a terrifying thought. But this defense, as currently constructed, is not good enough to win a championship in the next 5 years unless someone gets fired and something changes. Something's got to change here if they're going to get to where they want to be every year, because that's the expectation in Green Bay now. The expectation in the last 20 years has been to be a legitimate Super Bowl threat in the NFC. And with this defense, they're not that anymore. Maybe the way this defense was playing earlier in the year, they could have claimed to be that before the rash of injuries. But right now, and the way it plays at the end of the seasons the last few years, they're not going to win another Super Bowl with this defense. So something has got to change, or you're going to waste the entire career of Aaron Rodgers through no fault of his own. Getting back to Thursday as we kind of narrow the scope here a little bit. That wasn't even in my notes. I just kind of went on a tangent there. Some of the numbers from Thursday: Stafford, 22 of 35, 330 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a fumble loss that went for the Morgan Burnett touchdown, the only touchdown the Green Bay Packers would score on this day. Reggie Bush, 20 carries, 117 yards, a touchdown, and a fumble lost. Joique Bell, 19 carries, 94 yards, and a touchdown. Megatron, 6 catches, 101 yards, and a touchdown. Nobody went insane, but everyone was really, really good. And I shudder to think what the Lions would have done to this team without the turnovers. If Stafford doesn't throw one bafflingly right to Tramon Williams, if Morgan Burnett doesn't scoop that ball up and run it into the end zone. I mean, this team offensively was whipping the Green Bay Packers defense in any way it wanted to. So when it didn't stop itself, you have to assume those drives would have ended in points. And suddenly you've got 4 points at the very least ending, or drives at the very least ending in field goals. Take away the Packers touchdown, suddenly this game could have been 52-3. I mean, this was not even remotely in the same zip code close. This was as thorough a beating as I've seen in the NFL, not just in a Packers game, in the NFL in a very long time. The only one I can think of that compares is a few years ago in the snow when Tom Brady put like 59-3 on Tennessee or something. What was that, 2008 maybe? Maybe 2009? I don't really know, but I mean, this if there's no turnovers, if the Lions are more careful with the football at the beginning of the game, this is a historic beating, like a whipping for the history books. That's how bad the Green Bay Packers played on Thursday. And there was the route was on from the beginning, but Detroit managed to mask it with those turnovers. They turned the ball over 3 times early. Burnett runs in a touchdown. The Packers are actually leading 10-3 at one point. But you noticed before the turnovers, every single time, the Lions were moving the ball as much as they wanted to before they turned it over. And you couldn't turn them over 15 times in a game on every possession. So eventually the turnovers stopped. The Lions kept moving the football, and they scored many points. Just 1 sack out of this defense on Thursday. Not a whole lot of pressure on Stafford. He had time to do what he wants, and when Stafford gets time to do what he wants, generally he picks you apart. Nick Perry had that sack. Sam Shields was lined up on on Calvin Johnson by himself a lot of the game early, and Detroit recognized that and exploited the absolute heck out of it. Shields is very good, probably the best corner the Packers have, and a lot of teams would love to have him, including Detroit, who I would imagine is going to make a big play for him in free agency this offseason, because when the Packers leave when Green Bay Packers leave via free agency, they only ever go to division rivals. Shields, though, has been very good. We remember the A.J. Green game back in week 3 or 4, whatever it was, against the Bengals, but he was not up to the task on Thursday, and Johnson whipped him early, and then eventually they figured something out and got another guy helping him out, which didn't really help on the Megatron touchdown. You remember that? I don't know how this happens, and it's a microcosm of the Packers' defensive performance in one play. You've got Megatron lining up on one side. Shields is on him. Shields makes some sort of signal to MD Jennings, signaling to him that he's going to do something that's going to result in MD Jennings having to help him cover Calvin Johnson. Jennings either doesn't get the signal or doesn't understand. And now you've got Calvin Johnson running wide open in your defense, makes a catch, touchdown. If you mess up a coverage and Chris Durham's running wide open, fine. I can live with that. But someone on the defense has to account for the best wide receiver alive. And no one did. And he was running right across the middle of the field all by himself. You think Stafford's not going to, his eyes aren't going to light up when he sees that? Soft toss across the middle. Calvin Johnson in for an easy touchdown because nobody was on the best wide receiver alive. How on earth does that happen? Miscommunication, fine. You know what? If you aren't totally sure, go with Calvin, because when you play the Lions, the ball is probably going to Calvin Johnson. All of this might have been tolerable. It might have kept the Packers might have been able to stay in the game. if the offense had decided to make the trip to Detroit, but they stayed home and, I don't know, maybe they chilled and ate turkey and waited for the afternoon games. They sure as heck didn't feel like playing football. And God, this game's maddening. The time of possession from this game. Let's just start there and we'll go through all the weirdness that was this game for the Green Bay Packers on offense. The time of possession. Detroit Lions 40 minutes 20 seconds. Green Bay Packers 19 minutes 34 seconds. Third down conversions. The Green Bay Packers went 2 of 10. How does an offense with James Jones, Jordy Nelson, Eddie Lacy, I don't care who your quarterback is. This offense should have been way, 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 way better than it was on Thursday. It should have looked like at least an NFL competent offense. What happened to the Green Bay Packers offense on Thursday is what I imagine it would be like if, you know, when a team is really bad in the NFL, like the Jacksonville Jaguars, and everyone goes, hey, I wonder if, Alabama, the number one team in college before this last Saturday, I wonder if they could beat the Jaguars. And then you think to yourself, no, they could never beat the Jaguars. I would think if the Jaguars played Alabama, the Packers offense would look strikingly similar to what Alabama would be able to muster in that game. I don't know if what I just said makes sense, but it made sense in my head. This offense on Thursday had 126 total yards. 126 total yards between rushing and passing. They didn't even get to $150. The Lions had 561. The Lions had almost 440 more yards than the Green Bay Packers on Thursday. 102 passing yards, 24 rushing yards. God. And it gets even more fun. If it wasn't for a 56-yard garbage time completion to James Jones, which naturally was followed by a lost fumble, it would have been way worse. The Packers got nearly half their yardage this day, and and exactly half their passing yardage. Over half their passing yardage. On a play that didn't matter because they were already getting crushed. I don't know. Like, I don't have any answers for how that happens. But I guess it starts with the quarterback position, and world's greatest quarterback, Matt Flynn, was under siege all game. This offensive line, we talked about how the Green Bay Packers defense had no interest in stopping what Stafford wanted and the offense for the Lions wanted to do. The offensive line had no interest in stopping whatever the Detroit defensive line wanted to do on that day. Flynn was sacked 7 times, under pressure all game. Ezekiel Ansah had 2, Devin Taylor had 2, Stephen Tulloch had 1, and Ndamukong Suh had 1 for a safety, and Louis Delmas also had a sack. I don't know what Matt Flynn could have done with time, but I would have liked to see it. I don't even feel like we got an accurate admittedly, I just called him world's greatest quarterback, Matt Flynn. We've had our fun with the Matt Flynn thing here on this show. And admittedly, I've got a soft spot for the guy. I like him. I think I don't think he ever, or I think he can be better than he was in Seattle and Oakland. But so when I say I don't think he ever got a chance to show what he could be on Thursday, I'm being honest. I don't think he ever did. Maybe that's a little bit of bias clouding my judgment there, fine. But Flynn was hit like 15 times in this game. He was sacked 7. He was running for his life. I don't think the Packers even win this game with Aaron Rodgers, the way the offensive line decided to play in this game. I don't know how a better quarterback overcomes that. If anything, if Rodgers had played like I thought he would, but he didn't. If Rodgers had played, he's going to re-break that collarbone because of the way the quarterback was just decimated in this game. Flynn on the day, 10 of 20, 139 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. And I don't think he ever really got a chance. I saw a lot of people around the third quarter in that game clamoring for Scott Tolzien to come in because we are a fickle fan base apparently who is ready to pull the trigger on backup quarterbacks at the drop of a hat. And I said to a few people, like, how is Scott Tolzien going to fix this? He's just replacing the body that's going to get killed because the offensive linemen don't have any interest in protecting. Tolzien, I think, was warming up at one point. They didn't bring him in. They left Flynn in to get annihilated, and he did. Eventually, he would complete that pass to Jones to get him up over 100 yards on the day. But I just don't think Matt Flynn ever really had a chance in this game to do anything because the offensive line had no interest in allowing him to have that chance. And he didn't get a lot of help from his coach either. We've had some talks about Mike McCarthy's play calling in this game on the show. Remember going back a couple weeks ago against the Eagles when Tolzien came in and he was moving the ball, and then all of a sudden they get in the red zone and it would just be handed to Lazy twice and then throw on 3rd and long. McCarthy didn't seem interested in helping out Matt Flynn on Thursday either. Couple of early screen passes, trying to keep that defensive line at bay, and then that play was just gone. And the Lions realized it, and they pinned their ears back and they came at him. And it worked. Down 17-10, I believe it was at half. Offense completely sputtering. McCarthy, I told, who was the sideline reporter that he talked to? I know they had 2 of them that day. Might have been Aaron Andrews. But McCarthy told the sideline reporter that they were going to come out and they were going to try and be more aggressive on offense. And apparently a more aggressive was play action shots down the field. Now, when the defensive line is getting to your quarterback in ridiculously quick fashion, you don't get a ton of time to run play action shots down the field. And they found that out because Flynn got killed early and often in that strategy before they figured out it was a bad thing. And by the time they figured it out, they were down big and they were never coming back. Just organizationally, nobody on this team did their job well on Thursday. Coaching, players, nobody really did. The offense was just as stagnant as I've ever seen it for the Green Bay Packers. And it was really watching that football game as a Packers fan was like, just someone stabbing you in the stomach and then just twisting a knife for 3 hours. It was a horrible experience. They do have their Rookie of the Year running back candidate, though. So if the passing game isn't working, at least we can hand it to him, right? No, we can't do that either. Eddie Lacy on the day, 10 carries, 16 yards, no touchdowns, a long of 4 yards. The Lions just defensively had an answer for every single thing the Green Bay Packers tried on Thursday. And whether it be pass blocking or run blocking, the offensive line for the Packers was whipped from the first quarter to the end of the game, and this Packers offense never had a chance. And they played like it. The whole team played like it. Maybe the defense plays a little more inspired if it looks like the offense is going to score more than 3 points by themselves all day. But it never looked like that. It never once looked like the Packers were going to find something offensively. As I said earlier, I'm not even sure that Aaron Rodgers would have made a difference in this game. I think the only thing Aaron Rodgers would have done is get himself killed had he played. Because this offensive line was that bad, and he would have been beaten into the turf many, many times and probably hurt his collarbone even worse than it's hurt right now. So the Packers come into Detroit on Thursday. They're facing a sputtering Lions team. A chance to move ahead of the Lions, and they didn't know it at the time, but a chance to be in first by the end of the weekend. And they got absolutely smacked in the mouth. And just imagine how bad this would have been if Detroit didn't turn the ball over. As we noted earlier, the way they were moving the ball, you figure at least field goals on all those possessions. This could have been 52-3 or worse. Without those turnovers, and even with them, this has to be one of the most thorough beatings in NFL history, honestly. As I said, I can only recall one game recently that has been this not close in all facets of the game. Just a shameful performance from the Green Bay Packers in a huge spot. And I'm not giving Detroit enough credit here because Detroit took what Green Bay was going to do and they exploited Green Bay's weaknesses to the absolute max and throttled them all game long. Detroit really seems to get up for these division games this year. They've beaten the Bears twice, and now they smacked the Packers. And this is the kind of statement that could get the Detroit Lions back on track. They had lost a couple to Pittsburgh and Tampa Bay. This could right their ship going forward. This could be the win that propels them to their first division title in 20 years. But from a Packers perspective, it was all there for them. Win that game. They didn't know it at the time, but it would come together on Sunday that they'd be in first place. Instead, they get absolutely housed. And if they're watching football from their homes in January, they can really only blame themselves because they played absolutely terrible football in the biggest game of the year for them. Speaking of teams that can only blame themselves, Minnesota 23, Chicago 20. It's second down. Overtime. The Vikings have missed a field goal. We can attempt a 47-yard field goal right now to win the game. But it's second down. We could also run a play and get a few more yards and get a little bit closer for our kicker. Screw it. Let's kick it. I don't care if your kicker is a robot specifically designed to never miss field goals. Kicking the ball on second down in that situation from 47 yards out is really, 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 really dumb. 47. I don't care if that Robbie Gould's your kicker. 47 yards ain't a chip shot for anyone, and anybody can miss that kick. Even the robot specifically designed to never miss a field goal. So when you have an extra down to play with, like Chicago did, where you could, even if you don't get a first down, you could pick up 4 more yards, 5 more yards, make this a little more manageable for your kicker. Run the play. Don't play scared. Run it. Do something. Go forward. Get him those extra yards. Because there's no reason at all to kick a field goal on second down. I can understand third down. And teams do this a lot in overtime. Third down, let's kick the field goal now. We botch the snap, we get another chance. Fine, I can understand that. You're not botching the snap twice. And if you think you're going to, you've got to go out and get a new holder and a snapper because clearly you have no faith in them. So run another play and then kick it on third down. Get your kicker closer. And I know Bears coach Mark Trestman was, a little spooked by what happened on the Minnesota Vikings attempt to win it in overtime, their first attempt. Blair Walsh hits from 39, I believe it was. But a face mask penalty on the play bumps them back 15 yards. I think they ran another play and lost a couple. 57 yards, I believe, was Walsh for the winner, and he misses. I know you're spooked by that. I know you've seen it now, and you think, oh my God, we're here at 47 yards. If I run another play, we could get a penalty, and it could knock us out of field goal range. You know what else could happen? You could get 5 more yards and make it a perfectly manageable field goal for your kicker instead of one that, 47 yards is doable, but it's not automatic. I don't understand how you play scared like that. I don't know how you look at your guys and think, oh no, the Vikings screwed up. That could happen to us. Have some faith in your players that they're going to go out there and execute properly and get you the yardage you need to be closer to the game-winning kick. Of course, then the Vikings would go out on the next possession and kick it on first down, and they made it, so I don't get to yell at them. But I just don't understand the point, really, of ever kicking it before third down in overtime. And it lost the Bears this game. And now they're sitting second in the division. It might lose them a playoff spot too. So enjoy being second guessed about that one for the next 6 months, Mark Trestman, because that was a big call and it went against you. And that one decision that I started with and got on a little bit of a rant about, that kind of overshadows another pretty bad day from the Chicago Bears defense. Adrian Peterson is a monster, and he did monster things on Sunday. 35 carries, 211 yards. He didn't find the end zone, but he 211 yards. Ponder left hurt again, so Matt Castle got to go. Castle, 20 of 33, 243, a touchdown and an interception. And the one interception wasn't really his fault. A perfectly thrown ball to Rhett Ellison, who bobbled it and then dropped it, and it landed right in the arms of a Chicago defender for an interception. The Vikings also managed to pick up all 3 fourth downs they tried in this game, including a big 4th and 11, as they were trying to tie the game or win it at the end. At least nobody tied, though. And it looked like we were heading there for a while, but we got a winner and we got a loser out of this football game. And you just start to look at that Bears defense and you wonder, and we'll look at their schedule a little bit later, and we talked about this last Monday, I do believe, where we looked at the schedule and looked at all the running backs they had left to face and went, okay, they can't stop the run anymore. And most of these teams are equipped to beat them that way. They might have a problem. And it comes as really no surprise that the Vikings managed to run Adrian Peterson down their throats all game and come away with the win. Because no team in the division, and maybe no team in the NFL, is built and more equipped to take advantage of what the Bears are now awful at defending than the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings want to run the ball right at you all game, relentlessly, with Peterson and with Toby Gerhart if necessary. And the Bears just can't stop it anymore. And they didn't stop it on Sunday. Peterson didn't get into the end zone, but he He did a heck of a lot of damage, and he actually went over 10,000 yards for his career in this game as well on a beastly run filled with broken tackles and all sorts of fun stuff. So whenever a highlight clip is made of Adrian Peterson's career, at least that milestone run is going to be something fun to look at. The Bears' offense in this game, though, the Bears' offense showed up. And it starts at the quarterback position. Once again, Josh McCown continues to be everything you ever wanted in a backup quarterback. Like, to the point now where I'm starting to reconsider my it has to be Cutler hardline point of view, because McCown's been very, very good every time he's played for the Chicago Bears. Now, he does lack the arm strength of Jay Cutler. A few of his deep balls I thought might hit the freaking Metrodome roof. They were that rainbowed out there because he doesn't have the strength to throw lasers 40 yards down the field. But he's generally safer with the football, and it's they didn't win, but it's paying dividends for this Bears offense. They're moving the football at a rate that looks like the Jay Cutler offense, except they're not turning it over either. Now, McCown did channel his inner Jay Cutler for one play, and it was a weird one. Cutler or McCown, see, I'm confusing them because of this play. McCown being tackled or something, falling over, sidearm shovel pass towards a running back, and one of the Vikings linebackers, I think it was Audie Cole, stands in the way, just gets a paw on it. It deflects up into the air. Kyle Long, the offensive lineman, catches it, and then he fumbles, and the Vikings recover. I mean, that's a Cutler-esque play. That's a Favre-esque play as well. And one that McCown has generally not made in his time so far as the Chicago Bears starter. So, you'd like to see him get that out of his system. But other than that one play, Josh McCown was very impressive. Once again, as I mentioned, 23 of 36, 355, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Matt Forte played very well in this game as well. 23 carries, 120 yards, no touchdowns. But the star of this game, and the star maybe of the NFL weekend, despite the loss, was Alshon Jeffrey. Now, he's had several huge games this year. But if there was one game for him to come out and really put his name out there in the national scene, it was this one, because it was a monster of a game from Alshon Jeffrey. 12 catches, 249 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, Jeffrey, this isn't the first time he did that this year. Alshon Jeffrey has quietly built a monster of a season. 12 games played. He's only started 10 of them. 70 catches, 1,109 yards and 5 touchdowns, and 1 ridiculous touchdown catch. You know what I'm talking about if you watched the game yesterday. McCown in full-on Rex Grossman mode unleashes the dragon 40 yards down the field. And I don't know how Jeffrey holds onto this ball. He sort of reaches up, grabs it with 2 hands, and never brings it into his body. And despite, I believe it was Chris Cole, who eventually got ejected after this play, trying to knock it out, Jeffrey just, keeps a vice grip on this ball, somehow gets both feet in, and it's one of the best touchdown catches you'll see all year. It was amazing. So quietly, Alshon Jeffrey, he's become the guy in this offense beside Brandon Marshall, and maybe even above Brandon Marshall a little bit. Marshall on the year, 78 catches, 990 yards, 9 touchdowns. What Marshall has done is still great, but slowly, Alshon Jeffrey is starting to become the big play, the superstar threat on this offense that you really have to worry about. And for years and years and years, the Bears didn't have any receivers. It was the joke, They bring in Cutler, and he's thrown to Earl Bennett. You can bring in all the Cutlers you want, but if you don't have anyone to throw to, it's going to be a problem. Now they've got 2 guys. who you could legitimately consider among the better and best receivers in the NFL. You know, if you want to focus on Marshall, as most teams do right now because they don't know or they aren't as worried about Alshon Jeffrey as they should be, then Jeffrey will torch you. He did it yesterday. He's done it a few times this year. And I would imagine at some point coverage is going to start rolling over to Alshon Jeffrey. And you know who's going to torch you then? Brandon Marshall. They're both so good that I'm not totally sure how you cover both of them. And none of this is to mention that Martellus Bennett has been a very good threat as a tight end this year. So a Bears offense that a few years ago didn't seem to have any options for who to throw the ball to, suddenly it's loaded with them. I mean, I still don't think they're the deepest receiving core in the division. I still think when the Packers are healthy with Nelson, Cobb, Jones, and Boykin, I think that's the deepest core. But I think, you know, they've probably got two of the four best receivers in this division. You know, Megatron is obviously number one, and then you could fight with yourself about whether it's Marshall, Nelson, or Alshon Jeffrey next. But I do think when you look at it, the Bears have two of the four best receivers in this division now, which is a sudden and stark development and really a pleasant thing for them after what they've had to put up with at that position for so many years. And yet with all of the solid, the ridiculous performances that Chicago put up yesterday, they only managed to score 20 points, and they lost to the Vikings. We've talked about this a few times in Detroit losses, where they put up monster yardage games and only score, you know, around 20 points. And you look at it and go, how did this happen? How do you only score this many points but putting up this many yards? For the Bears, it was third downs yesterday. They went 2 of 11 on third down, which gets, you know, the offense off the field, punt, or the occasional field goal, and they don't score as many as they should. And what's frustrating for the Bears is if the Bears offense does what it did yesterday, yardage-wise, then you would expect them to score more than 23. As bad as the Bears' defense was yesterday, and they couldn't stop Peterson, and Castle was picking them apart a little bit, as bad as that was, the Vikings only scored 23 points. And on a day where the Bears' offense was humming in the way it was, 23 should not have been enough to beat them, but it was. And so the Bears go to the Metrodome, face a 2-8-1 Vikings team, and lose. So, with all of that 45 minutes said, where are we at? Well, where we're at right now is where we've been at for a little while now. We're tight, but the division is still in Detroit's hands. Detroit leads the division right now at 7-5. The Chicago Bears right now are second after the loss to the Vikings, by themselves at 6-6. The Packers are still within striking distance at 5-6-1, and the Minnesota Vikings are not mathematically eliminated yet at 3-8-1. The Lions are the only team in this division with a positive point differential right now. They're plus 39. The Bears are -9. The Packers are -11. The Vikings are -77. So let's look at some schedules now. Let's see what every team has left, and we'll go through that. We'll give some thoughts, some overarching thoughts on what they have left. And we'll start at the top. Detroit goes to Philadelphia this week. They've got the Baltimore Ravens and the New York Giants coming in, and then they finish up at Minnesota. All of those are potentially tough games. Detroit is going to have to be on their game if they're going to finish out this year in a strong way and really take this division crown instead of just, falling backwards into it. Philadelphia with Nick Foles right now is playing really well. And I don't know who I'm picking in that game, but if you ask me today, I'd have to lean Philadelphia. Baltimore is Baltimore. You never know what you're going to get on in any given week with them, but it could be good, it could be bad. Same with the Giants. And the Vikings lately have been better, and it's no gimme. Ask the Bears. Speaking of the Bears, they're 6-6 right now. They're one game back. They've got the Dallas Cowboys coming in this week. That's a tough game. They go to Cleveland. You never know what's going to happen against those uncommon opponents in that early afternoon window on the road. You just never know. They go to Philadelphia. As we've discussed, Philadelphia is very good. That's going to be a tough game. And they have Green Bay coming in with Aaron Rodgers. Speaking of Green Bay, 5-6-1. They're a game and a half back. They have Atlanta coming in this week, who is terrible. They go to Dallas. That's going to be a really tough game. They've got Pittsburgh coming in. That could be a very tough game as well. And a tough game going to Chicago to close it out. And finally, the Minnesota Vikings at 3-8-1 at Baltimore, Philadelphia coming in, at Cincinnati, Detroit coming in. That's the toughest schedule that any of these teams have left. And what I look at there and what I see is that I think 8-8 or 8-7-1 if the Packers finish up that way. What I'm saying is 8 wins I think could win this division. Detroit's sitting at 7-5 right now. But it's entirely possible that after that big division game, they have a letdown against a very good Philadelphia team. Baltimore could beat them and the Giants could beat them. That would finish them up at 8-8. Chicago could lose to Philadelphia and lose to Green Bay. That would finish them at 8-8. Green Bay could lose to Dallas. That would finish them at 8-7-1. Heck, 7 wins could do it, honestly. I mean, would it surprise anyone if Detroit chokes a little bit and loses out? Would it surprise, given their schedule, given that they've got pretty good teams left, and given that the Vikings are really at this point capable of anything, it seems like, would it surprise anyone if the Detroit loses out and goes to Philadelphia, welcomes Baltimore, the Giants, and goes to Minnesota? They lose all those games. I don't think it would really surprise anyone. I don't think it's going to happen. I would think they'd beat Minnesota, and they'll probably find another win in there somewhere. But if they were to lose out, it wouldn't be the most surprising thing that's ever happened. And I'm just at this point right now where I look at this division and I see all this mediocrity, and I just wonder, is this division really that bad? Or is every team just that horribly injured? And I think that's the case for the Packers, who I think are better. But I don't know about that defense, because the defense right now is relatively healthy, and they're playing horrible. So I don't know. Maybe this division really is just that bad. And this division right now is so bad. The Minnesota Vikings at 3-8-1 are still mathematically alive. If Detroit loses out, if Detroit and Chicago lose out, and Green Bay only beats Chicago, and Minnesota by some miracle wins out, they win the division. Which, honestly, if I wasn't a Packers fan, that's the kind of chaos I'd be rooting for. It's just weird, isn't it? Isn't everything in this division really weird right now? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in this division. I don't know who's going to win it. Obviously, Detroit right now looks like the front runner, but they just lost to Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh. They could lose to anybody. If anyone thinks it's not entirely possible that Detroit goes 2-2 in the last 4 and some other team wins this division, raise your hand, because I don't think this is a slam dunk by any means right now, no matter how well Detroit played on Thursday. Anyway, we move on. We'll finish up now with our players of the week, and we've got a bunch of them here. Lots of honorable mentions, lots of good performances in the division this week. A few really good performances in a loss, and that is actually where we'll start as we go with our player of the week on the offensive side. I think it's got to be Alshon Jeffrey. I know he lost, but come on. I mean, watch the highlights of that game. If you can watch what Alshon Jeffrey did in that game, the 80-yard touchdown reception, the ridiculous one from about 40, if I remember right. I mean, he was he was the best player in this division on Sunday/Thursday. It's not his fault the Chicago Bears lost. 12 catches, 249 yards, 2 touchdowns. I know they lost, but they did it in overtime, so it wasn't like they got killed. So Alshon Jeffrey, to me, is my player of the week in the NFC North. Now, honorable mentions, got 3 of them on both sides of the ball today. Honorable mention, first one goes to a guy who won that game. Adrian Peterson, 35 carries, 211 yards, no touchdowns. And I had a hard time giving him that award, considering he didn't find the end zone. If he had found the end zone, maybe I'm comfortable naming him my player of the week over Alshon Jeffrey, who found the end zone twice. I know Peterson's team won, but to me, Alshon Jeffrey had the bigger effect on that game. He was a more vital cog for what the Bears did. Although both of them were really, really, really important to their team's success on that day. Honorable mention 2. Reggie Bush, 20 carries, 117 yards, and a touchdown to help lead the Detroit Lions to their 40-10 victory over the Green Bay Packers. And that running attack was really just consistent all day. And I think in a way that helped to demoralize the Packers as that game wore on. Once Detroit stopped turning over the football and they started just pounding it with Bush and my other honorable mention, Joique Bell, 19 carries, 94 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, together that team ran for what? Was it like 240 yards or something? That's just, I think, when you're a defense and you have to deal with Megatron and you have to deal with Stafford, I think it's demoralizing to you a little bit, and you start to think to yourself that, what can we do to stop this offense? Because if we can't stop the pass and we can't stop the run, we've got big issues. And I think that once the Packers realized they couldn't stop either one of them, they started to quit a little bit on that football game. And eventually it ended up getting away from them. And it looked like a pretty pathetic effort from that Green Bay Packers defense. But Bush and Bell and their teammates really took advantage of that, really had a statement win. And if you're the Lions, you were hoping to God you can build off that going forward. Defensively, for our defensive player of the week, to me, I had to go with someone on that Detroit Lions defensive line just to recognize how good that defensive line was throughout that football game, because it took over that game, really. I mean, the Packers offense just could not do anything it wanted to. Passing the ball, they never had any time to throw. Running the ball, nothing was there. That defensive line took over that football game. And to me, the standout guy on that line was rookie Ezekiel Ansah. 3 tackles on the day, but 2 of them were sacks. And he was just in the backfield all game, disrupting everything the Green Bay Packers wanted to do. Whether it be, some of those play-action passes that McCarthy wanted to call in the second half. Someone was getting back there, being a disruptive force. A lot of the time it was Ansah. He was making plays in the running game. Ezekiel Ansah was just everywhere. And boy, if Nick Fairley ever figures it out, this defensive line for the Lions is going to really carry them to some great things over the next few years. Honorable mentions for this game, or for this week on the defensive side of the ball. Julius Peppers in a loss, and that's why he's going to get it in a loss. 5 tackles, 3 assists, 2.5 sacks. We've covered Peppers a little bit on the show in the past, how he started out real slow, but he started to come on the last few weeks, maybe the last month or so, and really started to look like the Julius Peppers that you remember. And he was that on Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings. They came up short, but it wasn't Julius Peppers' fault. Other honorable mention, Ndamukong Suh, 2 tackles, 2 assists. He had a sack that went for a safety on Matt Flynn, and really, I mean, that just buried the Packers. I mean, maybe they were already buried at that point, but that was just, extra dirt on the grave at that point. And Ndamukong Suh with a big safety, and anytime you get a safety, it's always a huge play in a football game. Last honorable mention, Chad Greenway, Minnesota Vikings linebacker, 6 tackles, 4 assists, 1 sack. He was, just solid. That's what Chad Greenway is on a weekly basis. Greenway is just a solid linebacker, making plays, making tackles all over the field, got a sack on Sunday, helped this defense, which was, burned often by the Bears, but never, a lot of bend but don't break in that Vikings defense on Sunday. And Greenway was a big part of that, making plays on third downs and whatnot to get them off the field after they'd gotten their yards. As I mentioned, the Bears only converted 2 third downs that entire game. And Greenway was a big part of making sure they got off the field in those situations. So, with a couple minutes left, that will be my time for this Monday, December 2nd, 2013. We will talk to you again on Friday, and on Friday. Fun show for you on Friday, because it's always... The shows on Friday, we haven't gotten to a show on Friday in the last, I think it's been 3 weeks. We will be back this Friday, and it's going to be a fun one because 4 games to look through. And I always enjoy those ones when we get 4 separate games to look through in a preview show on a Friday. The Packers have the Falcons coming in. The Lions in a big game, and it's probably the game we'll start with on Friday. The Lions are traveling to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. The Vikings will take on the Ravens. As we mentioned, insanity could reign supreme if the Vikings can pull off a Ravens upset and everyone else loses, because suddenly Minnesota would be mathematically still in this. And the Bears will welcome the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday. Want to encourage you to stay tuned. Tidbits and Tunes will be up next for you on your radio boxes. Want to remind you tomorrow at 2:45, UW Lacrosse broadcasting WMCM Sports Talk Live on the television channel. And yours truly will be making his television debut if you want to see how weird and awkward I look. saying weird and dumb things about sports. So I'll be doing that on television tomorrow, 2:45 on WMCM. Please tune in. Tweet any feedback on that to BlackBlueRAQ. Please don't